Hello and welcome back to the Cfctalk podcast. I'm your host, Mohammed Sajid, joined again this time with a very special guest, Rahul, from that Premier Chelsea podcast. It does get confusing when the names are very similar, but Rahul, welcome to the podcast once again. Great to have you on, and what a game to discuss as well. Aston Villa 0, Chelsea 2, 3 points on the road. Graham Potter still unbeaten at his time at Chelsea. I know it's still the honeymoon period, but us Chelsea fans are really feel like things have turned around and hopefully for the better good now. And Mason Mount with the performances that he's putting in, Kepa as well. And I know we're going to dive in individually into the players and talk a bit about that, as well as the Brentford game coming up. So Rahul, first of all, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing? How's it been so far, and how's everything going with you?
Thanks for the welcome. This is my third time, I believe, on your podcast, so I feel a little more regular than Pulisic does playing for Chelsea. No, jokes aside, it's good to be back, and I know it's been a while since we've caught up. So, look forward to talking Chelsea and talking soccer, football, whatever you want to call it.
Look, you'll have to be very careful when you go at Pulisic like that, because the American fans on Twitter aren't gonna.
Hey, look, I live in America, right?
Right.
I fall on both sides, but obviously I'm a Chelsea fan and a
Yeah.
Pulisic fan when he puts on the U.S. jersey. But we'll stick to Chelsea for this one.
Yeah. Well, in general, I think the Aston Villa game was a bit of a stretch. It wasn't one of the best of performances so far under Graham Potter, and it wasn't the Milan-esque performance that we saw again, but in both legs, actually. But it was a game where we kind of had to dig deep and just get those goals and just get the points on the road. And it was, again, they were coming off of, I guess they were off a 4-game unbeaten run in the Premier League, and we knew they were going to sit in defense. They were going to sit deep and just bring out a draw from this, because they've struggled as well at times, and there've been calls for Steven Gerrard, and I can't remember if he's there were rumors about him getting sacked as well. So, your just in general, quick thoughts about the game and how we performed on that day before we
Yeah, I
dive
mean,
into the players.
yeah. I mean, it was look, it's 4 games now in the space of 2 weeks, maybe a little bit less. So you expect, especially when you have the kind of performances that we've had against Milan, that subsequent games will have a dip. You can't perform at that level consistently, especially now that Potter is coming in, rotating, moving things around, different formations, different players. It's almost expected that there will be a dip, but you got to ride through that, and that's exactly what we did. And a tough away game, Villa away is never easy. I'm sure you remember from years past that we've gone there and struggled. So this was not going to be an easy game, but we rode our luck. I'm sure we'll touch on the Kepa piece. But we rode our luck. We dug deep, like you said, and we came back and took our chances, which is something that we usually don't do very well. Mason Mount takes his chances and puts us in a 2-goal lead. And I'm actually looking here at the stats, and I think this is for the first time since Potter has come in that the other team outshot us, had more shots on target. So definitely Villa were the better side on the day in terms of expected goals, in terms of even the performance, I'd say. But big teams, as you know, have to go away and dig deep, and that's exactly what we did. And I don't know if this happens maybe a month or so ago. So you got to be happy with the way things are going.
Look, I think with Tuchel being gone, it was very tough for a lot of Chelsea fans to digest that, um, and I guess Graham Potter's come in, and obviously we haven't forgotten fully about Thomas Tuchel, and I don't think we'll be able to do that for a long time. You still see a lot of Chelsea fans tweeting about him, and people still tracking where he's going and what's his next step going to be like in football. But Graham Potter coming in and changing things around, and as you said, the rotation, I think that has been key for us these past few games. What we haven't seen under Thomas Tuchel is a lot of rotation, and even when that rotation does happen, the performances haven't been to a level that's been expected from the caliber these players have. And under this new management, and not taking away from whatever Thomas Tuchel's achieved at Chelsea, but what Graham Potter has done here is there's also a second team or a rotating squad that can come in and play these type of games midweek, because we know how many games there are until the World Cup. So, and with the injuries of Reece James as well as N'Golo Conte, and today we heard about Thiago Silva as well. It's very important for every single player in the squad to have that first team experience, to have that you know, to be ready whenever called upon and to perform to the level that's expected of them. But quickly you know, when we were talking about the defense, this is our fourth clean sheet, I think, in a row. And if I'm not wrong, this is the first time we've ever done that since 2016. And that was the last time that we had 4 clean sheets in a row. Antonio Conte, and as you mentioned, Aston Villa with the amazing chances that they had, but Kepa keeping us in the game, starting from him. Honestly, I think as much of a credit goes to Mason Mount for those 2 goals, I think Kepa kept us in that game. And the way he brilliantly made those saves, those 7 saves, was incredible. And the stats say it all. And I know a lot of people don't like to mention stats here, but what are your thoughts on, I guess, because we've seen what he's done and how much effort he's put in behind the scenes, but what are your thoughts on his transformation at Chelsea, going from someone who probably every single fan didn't like, and we were all ready to let him go, and suddenly now under Potter, he starts ahead of Mendy because of his form and his performances and his attitude, I guess, most importantly, because that was not the same attitude that he had maybe under Sarri or other managers at Chelsea.
Yeah, I mean, Kepa's come in. I think, the big fee was obviously going to be a hurdle for him to get over, which eventually came back and haunted him a little bit, you could say, especially in the Lampard era. And I think we've always said, especially on our podcast, that when players are struggling, it's better to kind of put them out of the limelight. Of course, it helps that you have a Mendy that can come in and do the job and kind of allow Kepa in the background to regain his form, regain his confidence, and maybe just study his game with the goalkeeping coaches and understand what he's doing wrong. Again, in the summer, I know he was linked with the move away. When we watched the team play in Charlotte, he wasn't even there. So he could have taken that and sulked and said, I wanted to move away. I didn't get my move. But I think he even came out and said that ultimately I'm here. I got to fight for my position. I got to fight for even maybe playing for Spain at the World Cup. And he seems to have the right attitude now, which is maybe just maturity, Mohammed. I think he came in, 3-4 years ago. He's 28 now. He was 24 then. I'm sure when you and I think you're a little bit younger than me, but when I was 24, if I had that, I was like, oh, I'm the big money goalkeeper. I'm the big, big deal. And then I take a hit. That's going to affect your mind, and the way you bounce back from that is going to take some time. So I think he's matured on and off the pitch. His relationship status helps too. I know a lot of
Yeah.
fans joke about that, but I think for someone that maybe doesn't have his family around, I don't know if that is true, but I'm just trying to think of things that could be going right. Ultimately, you look at this game and you say he just had the confidence. He was in some cases at the right place at the right time, but that adds to the confidence. And he's now had 4 clean sheets, like you said. And I was actually thinking Mendy may work his way back in with the number of games we had, but goalkeeping is a position where you don't need to rotate that much, especially with how many games are coming. And especially with the way Kepa is playing. So I don't know if Mendy finds a way back in. I know we have a Carabao Cup game in November, maybe that one, but Kepa long may continue, and we're almost seeing his value come back up now, which is what we want to see ultimately, whatever the club decides to do. But the way he's playing right now, he definitely saved us in this game, and I think we can start counting on him, and I think he wants that too, and obviously it'll help him moving forward.
Completely echo what you say here, because I think honestly, the way he's come back from where he was is incredible to see. And I think even in the post match conferences that he was part of, he was very confident about what he did, and just praising the coaches, the backroom staff, and helping him get to the level that he is right now. So and we're not trying to take, and I don't want the fans to get an image of this and think of it in a way where we're trying to take away from Mendy, because he's also an incredible goalkeeper. And at the same time, at Chelsea, you do need 2 incredible goalkeepers. And if one of them's not performing as well as the other, you do swap them out. You do give the other one as a rest, as Rahul said. You take them out of the limelight. You give them the the effort they need on the training pitch before you bring them back on. Because as in a squad of 20, 22, 23 players, you are expected to rotate, and at the same time you yourself you yourself know that if something goes wrong, someone else is waiting for their own opportunity. So instead of worrying about the fact when you're going to play next or how your next game's going to come, it's way better to just focus on what's going to what you need to do behind the scenes for that big day or that big moment that you get. And Kepa, I think, has taken it brilliantly. You know, Mendy was struggling and Kepa came in and he performed in a few games, and that's why he's still here. I mean, I highly doubt if he would have conceded a few more goals in the Milan game or in any of the games, that the first few games where Kepa was a goalkeeper, he would have been part of this match as well. I mean, Mendy would have come back in, but it's incredible to see him. But in defense, I mean, with Reece James being out for 8 weeks, we saw a very, very weird back four with Chalobah, Silva, Cucurella, and Chilwell. Essentially, was the back four that was listed on the lineup sheet. I'm pretty sure Potter had some of his other tactics going on in between the match, but for some reason, FootMob has Cucurella as a center back and Chalobah as a right back. So that's a bit weird to see. But your quick thoughts on it, and then Thiago Silva as well. I think he's got a hamstring injury, so he might not be playing this. He might be sitting out the Brentford game.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Reece James injury just adds, because you know Reece James is a starter automatically. Whenever he's fit, he's a starter. But we don't have a natural replacement for him. And yes, we have players that can come in and do the job. As for Laqueta, Chalobah, like you mentioned, the team sheet I'm looking at, Raheem Sterling played right wing back. So it's really like you were saying, depending on the outlet and how they interpreted it, depends on that. But Loftus-Cheek we've seen come in and play the right, and I think he eventually switched him over to the right towards the first half, mid first half. But anyway, um, it's it's interesting because Thiago Silva, you know what you get with that 100% commitment, reliance on him. I think Cucurella struggled, and you saw that with the halftime substitution. And the other thing there is Graham Potter realizes some of those things early enough to make those changes where he says, you know what, I think Cucurella is struggling in this game. Just not his day, maybe, not able to keep up with Bailey coming through, Ramsey coming through, Watkins on the other side coming on, flipping over. So it's good understanding from him, and ultimately making the change and bringing a Koulibaly in and refreshing that area, and maybe making it a little more tough. I think Chalobah, great potential. You know, I think he's had a good year now in the first team squad, in and out of the squad, but he's definitely featuring a lot more now that Fofana is injured, Reece James is injured. And what's the stat? I think we haven't lost a game where he's played, which is
Yeah,
great. Long may that continue. But
yeah,
he does have some of those rash mistakes in him, which you'd expect from a young player. So, all in all, I think the defense was okay. I think Kepa really saved the day. But moving forward, if Thiago Silva is now injured, I think that makes me a little nervous because Brentford away is not going to be an easy game, and then Manchester United to follow up with that. It's tough when you have two of their top defenders, Sofana, Thiago Silva, and Reece James, make that three out with these kind of games coming up. But that's what you pay Potter to figure out, and you give him the tools. You have the tools. You look at the squad and you say, okay, yes, we can move things around, but missing those kind of players is always tough.
yeah. In terms of defense, I think it wasn't the best of performances because when your goalkeeper has to make 7 or 8 vital saves to keep you in the game, you do realize that there's something shaky about the defense. And as you mentioned, Graham Potter had that. Um, he knew, he was aware of what needed to be done. And after halftime, when Koulibaly came in, it was a very different defensive situation at Chelsea. And you know, I think with Potter, as we keep on saying, and I feel like we're going to keep on saying this for a few weeks or even more longer until this run continues, where he's rotating players, giving everyone time. And I think with one of the big reasons of him coming at Chelsea was because he had this whole degree and he had this experience of handling players and the mental sides of players. So I think him being there in the backroom staff, him being there supporting players in the training ground is what's changing a lot of these players' mentality at Chelsea. Because even when Pulisic comes on to play, when players who haven't been uh, at their greatest of forms or haven't been the fan favorites this season, when they come on and play, we don't see the same kind of attitude that was there under Tuchel. It's a very different attitude. Pulisic does seem like someone who's trying his best, even though he might not be getting goals or assists, but he does seem like he's more eager. He's more interested in playing this style of football. So it's very nice to see that as well. And as you mentioned, Reece James, and I think the biggest, I guess the biggest bit difference that I noticed was Raheem Sterling and the lack of, because I think Raheem did start on the right hand side. So I think the biggest one was Raheem and Reece James not linking up, and that link up that's been there this whole start of the season wasn't there, and which affected Raheem Sterling as well, which we didn't see much of him as well, which I guess is going to happen because Reece James having that the ability that he has of going so high up the pitch and still be able to track back and defend. Not a lot of defenders or wing backs possess that, and Liverpool have one who can't do both. And I'm gonna get a lot of stick from Liverpool fans for this, but it has to be said. Like I feel like I do this every episode, and I just go at Trent Alexander-Arnold because of what happened, but. No, we can't go after them since that Man City against win against Man City. So
without Trent though.
yeah, that yeah. So maybe he is the cause of the losses and the draws that they're facing. But moving on to Mason Mount, I think great performance from him as well. And I think a lot of people on my feed suddenly had this, I guess, the urge to go after Tuchel and say, well, Mount wasn't playing in his position under Tuchel, which is why this and that. And I just believe Mount last season was a Mount that we haven't seen before, and the season before that as well, that Champions League run, and that's because not because he was playing in different positions, but because that's just the ability Mount possesses. And we've gone through multiple coaches all the way from Frank Lampard now under Graham Potter. Mount has been one of the most consistent players. It was just a bad run of form in my opinion. I think Mount now what he's doing is incredible, and it's expected of him. And as we said, he set the bar so high the last few seasons where performances where he's not getting an assist or a goal just seem like average performances. And a bit of a stat for those who might be interested, but he's got 32 goals and 36 assists in 173 appearances, whereas Frank Lampard at that time had 31 goals and 18 assists. So maybe someone who could dethrone Frank Lampard for assists and goals at Chelsea, but goal contributions at Chelsea. But what did you make of Mason Mount's performance in that free kick? Can we? That was a beautiful free kick.
Yeah, it was he's on fire. You just gotta say he's in a man in form. And yes, you can say that now, but you gotta look back and earlier this season he wasn't. You gotta call it as it was. And I think a lot of fans did call it the way it was back then. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? We love Mason Mount. He's come through the academy, he's a Chelsea boy. But if you're not performing, that's when you, like we were saying, you go out of the limelight, you take some time and spend some time on the bench and just maybe get your mind right, maybe get your training right, and then come back. Of course, the change here has been Graham Potter, maybe allowing Mount a little more freedom to do some of the attacking side like he likes to do. He's an attacking player. Under Tuchel, maybe he was more focused on the defensive side and linking play. Now you see Mount finishing in that first half in the box, and then the free kick obviously was great, but I suddenly just noticed Mount with a little more freedom to float, maybe do a little more of the build up, and you see that again in the Milan game where he lays that ball off, which Aubameyang finishes. Maybe under Tuchel, he's a little bit further back and doesn't get to that. But anyway, I think it comes down to, like you were saying, Mount has been so good for the last 2 seasons that we've suddenly just expect him to just do it game by game. And he is human. He has played a lot. He doesn't really pick up any injuries, knock on wood. And so he consistently features in that game, maybe in the team, I beg your pardon, and maybe not starting every single game depending on the game, but he's always coming on, even if he's not at the starting 11. Because coaches, like you said, and I'll throw Gareth Southgate in there too. He picks him, he plays him, he knows what he can bring. Sometimes ahead of Phil Foden, which I know when you compare the two, a lot of people say, well, Foden's more technical. Well, Mount works way too hard to just say, you know what, we don't want you in the team, because then he can do what he does in that Villa game and contribute goals. So I think you always want that kind of a player in there. And the other side is I look at Kai Havertz, and he was struggling earlier this season. He's still struggling a little bit now. So you got to look at what Mount's doing now and say he's not only got the talent and the skill, he's also got the mental strength to say, I was struggling, I'm going to pull myself out of this. And he's done exactly that. And now we're just almost expecting the next game, what's he going to do? And the next game, what's he going to do? Which again, if he doesn't contribute, you're going to see Twitter go off and say, well, Mason Mount's he just had a couple of good games and that's it. But I think what he did in this game, what he did against Milan, the last game before this one, he's got it. And I think we just got to give him time. He's what, 23, 24 still. I think it's we're in for a great ride with him as long as he's around. And I hope we give him that new contract because he clearly deserves it.
Yeah, no, it is very exciting to see Reece James, when Reece James signed that huge contract.
Yeah.
I know Real Madrid are thinking they can come after Reece James, but they can whatever they offered, and that whatever was mentioned in that tweet was as people would like to say, it wouldn't even be enough to buy Reece James's
Just
hair.
just just show him Eden Hazard's career since he moved there, and I think
Yeah.
that's enough.
Um, no, yeah, it's really exciting because honestly, that academy connection, I think, as you mentioned, is something that a lot of fans do connect with. And Mount, Reece James, Chalobah, all of these young players, and it's very rare for a player to come in at Chelsea uh, when they're at their prime and make a mark. Not a lot of players have done that. Yes, there have been, obviously in the past there have been many, but in recent times I can't remember a lot of signings. Obviously, Thiago Silva and N'Golo Conte might not be part of that list, but a lot of them have had to prove themselves, have had not the best of their times at Chelsea, but um, yeah, I think it's really excited to see what Mount can do this season because I think, as you mentioned, the role that he's gotten under Graham Potter, it's something that will allow him to be more free, try and take those shots on, try and create those chances because the Mount, and I know I'm kind of contradicting the point that I made about him just not being in form under Tuchel, but I guess the stats say it all. Under Tuchel was a very different Mount and in terms of the heat map as well, if you look at it and compare the two, it's a very different situation in there. Not a lot in this game from our front three or the front three that started on the night though. Kai Havertz, Aubameyang, and Sterling, and even throughout the game as well. Sterling played 89 minutes, and even though Havertz was subbed off at halftime, and I think Potter knew what he was doing with Havertz taking Havertz off. But in general, nothing to offer from that front three, and I guess that's more of because Reece James is not there. Because we've said it time and time again, a lot of what Chelsea depend on is on that right hand side with Reece James, and once he's not in the team sheet, it's a struggle fest for Chelsea, and that's what we're seeing. But I do hope we do find a solution for that because we realistically, yes, you might be able to scrape away a win like this against Aston Villa, but Rahul, I highly doubt this can continue up until the World Cup with the games that were coming in. And even if we talk about the Carabao Cup game against Man City, I highly doubt either of those teams are going to be naming a second team squad or won't have these players in their substitutes just to bring them on last minute and get the goal because Haaland is expected to go up against Thiago Silva in that Carabao Cup, is he?
Yeah, I mean it's so far out that you almost we're talking about it, but we don't know what happens between now and then and who's fit, who's not fit. And I think we have another game right after that over the weekend. So rotation's definitely gonna happen, but if Holland is starting, then we need our best defender to start, and that would be Thiago Silva. But I can't even think that far out in terms of players and stuff. But yeah, you're right. I think and it's interesting, and I'd like to ask you this: if we end this season with however we ended, we finished top four. Do you bring in a replacement or someone that plays second fiddle to a Reece James on the account that we know these past two campaigns, Reece James has picked up a knee injury or a knock and he spends a few weeks out? Then you bring someone in that can basically come in and do the job that Reece James does, but for majority of that season, that person's just going to be sitting on the bench.
I think it'll be a difficult one, and the reason I say that is because Reece James is so young that a lot of players who Chelsea approach will kind of think of it in a way that I'm a second choice right back or right wing back at this team, and if I'm any if I'm 25 or younger, I'll say why would I want to join a team, play maybe twice every month or 3 times a month, depending on the amount number of games, and not have regular football, and kind of, I guess, not in a way retire from football, but take a step back, which is, and that's why I think one of the main reasons why Chelsea offered Azpilicueta the contract that they did, and they didn't let him go to Barcelona, was because it was going to be hard to find someone who could be a backup to Reece James, and the ability that he has of attacking ability and defensive ability. And we mentioned this on the podcast a few times before as well, where there's nothing wrong with Azpilicueta. It's just that because of his age, the pace that he's got now, because Asby has been an incredible right wing back for Chelsea in that 2016 season. There was nothing to take away from that. But now, because of his age, he doesn't have that pace to go up front, attack, and then run back and defend as well at the same time. So with Asby defensively, I still don't see any issues. I still think this is the same Asby from before. It's just that because Asby doesn't offer that attacking ability, there's a lot of times that he gets stick for the performances that he puts in games compared to Reece James, because obviously you can't compare someone who's 21 and someone who's towards the end of the career. So yeah, it'll be a tough find. But what are your thoughts on that?
No, I totally agree with you, and I agree, actually agree on the Aspilicueta piece, which is, um, I'm sure from what we had heard, he wanted to go to Barcelona. I think he wanted a new adventure, having won everything at Chelsea, but he stayed, and I think it was the right move for the club because I look back to the Wolves game, and yes, it was just the Wolves game, but Aspilicueta was on fire, especially that first half. He was making a lot of runs forward. I think what helped was Conor Gallagher playing in that front three, but also coming back and filling in the gaps and having that engine to go back and forth. Maybe allowing Aspie to make the runs forward and track back as and when he could. I think if you put the right players in and around, like you say, Thiago Silva, who's 38 and thriving. Not saying Aspilicueta will be the same because it's a different position and it does require you to go forward a lot. But if you have the help from the midfield, from your winger ahead of you, you could do the job. And Aspilicueta, I think, if I'm not wrong, has a decent amount of assists for the club. I look back to that season under Conte. You were mentioning the first one. The second one, I clearly remember him and Morata were connecting pretty well the first 3-4 months of the season. So Aspilicueta has it in him. But you're right. For someone that has to come in a little bit younger than Aspie and say, I'm going to be sitting on the bench for 60-70% of the season, but on the off chance that Reece James needs to be rested or is injured, I come in. That's a tough sell, and I think that's where the manager, the club will have to do a great job of finding someone that is okay with that kind of a role, maybe a little bit older in their career. But yeah, I think we do need someone that can do the job, and I think Aspilicueta is expected to move on next summer,
Yeah.
and naturally we'll have to bring in someone. But we have a Loftus-Cheek who I think can do the job if and when needed,
Yeah.
but it's nowhere near what Reece James brings, and I think that's where you feel the drop where you don't have the attacking output from the replacement.
Exactly. It's one of those where Chilwell, I think we realized last season when Chilwell got injured that we needed someone as good
Right.
as Chilwell to replace him, and which is why we brought in Cucurella. Obviously, there have been a few shaky performances, but so far this season, I think Chilwell and Cucurella both have been par with each other in terms of their performances and what they've given to this Chelsea team. So yeah, it'll be something that they'll look at, and obviously with the news that's coming in with Nkunku
Yeah.
and Liao as well from AC Milan and those January transfers. Because Todd Bowley, realistically, when you hear him speak about Chelsea, when you hear that news come out, and when you hear that he's still talking about he's already started talking about the January window. He's already making moves, trying to get contact players. You realize that he's not in this just to earn that money back or just in a financial way. He's in here to try and make Chelsea one of the greatest teams, and that's what he's done in America with the Dodgers as well. So yeah, it's going to be one that they're going to be looking at, I guess, all season and until a final replacement's been made. And I think we'll hear more about this towards the summer. I don't think there's a rush to replace it or anything, but there's good news about Reece James not needing surgery. He's probably going to delay that decision even more, I guess, until the summer at least. But Moving on to the midweek game that we've got against Brentford, another away game for Chelsea. A bit of a break from Champions League football, but games are still coming thick and fast. Another rotation for you on that day, or do we play a big squad? Obviously, with Thiago Silva being out, Reece James and N'Golo Conte being out, that we have to be very careful with the players that we put out because a few injuries as well we might be prone to a few more injuries here.
Yeah, I think we definitely rotate. I think Kepa keeps a spot, but apart from that, if Thiago Silva's out, maybe Chalobah plays along with, depending on the system, of course, but Koulibaly, maybe Aspie comes back in. Cucurella only played 45 minutes, so you kind of expect him to play, at least start this game with Chilwell, getting a rest. And then midfield, I think Jorginho comes back in. Kovacic, I think, was taken off early or towards the end of that second half, so he may play. And then the front three, I'd like to see Mount start. I'd like to see Pulisic start. And then I don't know about that forward position. Aubameyang should be able to play. I think he didn't play the full game against
No,
Villa, so he should be ready. But I'd also like to see Armando Broja get a run out. I don't know if he starts, but yeah, Brentford's going to be a tough one. I remember last season we went there and we only won 1-0 thanks to a Chilwell goal, and we required Mendy to pull off some decent saves. So Brentford are going to be tough, and we've seen what they've done this season against United at home. We've seen what they've done just the other night against Nottingham Forest, where Ivan Toney is bang on form, and I'm sure they have a point to prove against their West London rivals.
Yeah, Thomas Frank won't be just coming in for a draw. He'll bring this Brentford team in and try and get as many points as he can on the night. And I think you're right in terms of the goal and defensive situation. There's not a lot to pick from with Reece James and Silva being out. Chalobah and Fofana as well I can't remember if he's available yet, or I think the press
I think he might
conference.
still be out. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, yeah, with just a few options, there's not much that we can do. But the midfield is where we might see Jorginho come in, as you mentioned. Mount again might start, but yeah, I'd like to see Pulisic play as well. I think Havertz has had his turn. Maybe give Sterling that rest as well. We've got Man United as well on the weekend, so that could be someone who might be rested, and we might see Havertz and Pulisic play, but. At the same time, the Broja situation is quite tricky because yes, he's been scoring, but at the same time, you've got Aubameyang who you've brought in for the sole purpose of scoring goals, and he's scored 2 goals or 3 goals in the last few games. So you do give him time. What you don't want to do is just keep him out for a game as a rest or as a precaution, and then he loses confidence or he loses his form. So it is a tricky situation. But even after that, if I'm Graham Potter, I might just give the nod to Broja only because I'd bring on Aubameyang towards the end of the game and save him for that big and important Man United game. Because as much as I think this Brentford game is important, we've got to look at Man United as well. And the last thing you want is them gaining points from us in a situation where I guess they're looking to climb up the table, and the last thing they want to do is take away points from any of the top 4 or 5 positions that they may be aiming for this season. So at the same time, Brentford they'll go for a win, but if they see a Chelsea team which is hungry, they might just sit back, take the point, and be happy with that. But you never know on the night what could happen. Yeah, what would your score predictions be? We've started doing that with a lot of our guests to put them on the spot. So your score predictions on the night, and if there are any goal scorers, who would they be?
The last few weeks I've been predicting us conceding, and we've been keeping clean sheets.
So maybe
Uh,
predict another concede.
yeah, I think I should do that just to
Keep it tradition.
do. I think I'll go for a 2-1 to Chelsea. It's going to be tough, like you said. I think the Brentford fans will be right on their team and driving them to win this game. And they did beat us last time around in April at home at Stamford Bridge, which was quite a shocking result. So yeah, I think if we come out of this game with the win, that will certainly be a very big boost to the confidence going into the United game, because we haven't beaten United. God, I can't even remember the last time we beat them. It's been so long. So let's get a good result here against Brentford, and then fully focus on getting a win against United, because it's about time.
Yeah, we don't have a good history against United, whether it be home or away. There have been games where we've completely dominated the whole game and we've lost by just one goal or a 90-minute goal or a last 10-minute goal. So it's going to be an important one. But in terms of Brentford, I think, yeah, you're right. I'm gonna. Well, my gut feeling is just I think it's just gonna be another 1-0, maybe a 2-0. But for me, I really want to see Pulisic on the score sheet again. I really want to see a good performance from him if he does start. And even if he doesn't start, I want to see him come off the bench and show some intent and show some passion for the club. That's all I want from him. Because as much as people like to criticize him and to a certain point go over criticize him, he's someone we signed as a replacement for Hazard, and we have to realize the level that Hazard was on was probably a level not a lot of players at Chelsea will get to. And there was a time where Hazard was compared to Ronaldo and Messi, so it's very rare for players to be compared to that level. And I guess with Pulisic, we're not asking for him to be achieving those levels right now, but just to be consistent and I guess not pick up those injuries. And I just yeah, as long as Pulisic scores, nothing against the guy. I'm not saying it because I want to see some offers come in January or August or next summer, but I just want him to score and he's the wonder kid Chelsea really invested in when we got him, and he was the guy that was going to transform Chelsea when Hazard left. So he's someone I've always had high hopes for, even though I've been quite critical of him this season under Tuchel as well in terms of his attitude and when he's come on to play. And I think a lot of fans have been. But yeah, it's going to be exciting to see whether what he does on the night. But Rahul, once again, thank you very much for coming on the podcast and speaking to us about the Villa and Brentford game. Um,
Thank, Thanks for having me on. It's been great fun, and happy to come back whenever. And I'm sure we'll keep in touch. But wish you all the best with this podcast.
Thank you very much for that. But for those of you guys watching, make sure to follow Rahul on all of his social media pages. We'll link it in the description below as well as on the information card on the right. If you're listening on the audio platforms, make sure to follow us, add us to your playlist. It does really help us a lot. And the algorithm as well. Make sure to subscribe, leave a like rating, and if you want the latest Chelsea news, even though Instagram, this is a bit of a shout out or a call out to Instagram for shadow banning us for some reason. We yeah, it is quite surprising. We've gone from what 600-700 likes on a post to like 50 to 60 for some reason,
Oh
and
wow!
it's quite a weird one. But yeah, thank you all of you guys for watching. Make sure to follow all of our social media pages for the latest news on Chelsea FC and the latest contents, and follow Rahul once again as well. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Until then, stay